January 20, 2022. Bought me a motorhome. Got 44,000 miles on it. And for some stupid reason, instead of cleaning up the old carburetor that was on it, they just took it off and put a reman on it. Now, I don't know if you've ever messed with reman carburetors, but they're generally junk. This one has never had fuel in it since it was rebuilt. So I changed the needle and seat. And when you change the needle and seat, because it had a defective needle in it, the little rubber thing was broke on it, I took this little gasket out to give me some more clearance. Because for some oddball reason, this remanufactured carburetor would not let any fuel in. So the needle was not opening up. So I had to order a whole carburetor clip. I could have got just the needle and seat. And what we're going to talk about here is how you would test this to see if you've got an issue. Well, your needle and seat's right down there. It's attached to this float right here. And that opens up and closes up and maintains your fuel level. And what I did, in order to run this truck, because I got to clean out the fuel system, I got this little jewel right here, and it's attached to that right there, which goes to this 2-liter bottle. It's got a little water in it. I don't want to use gasoline in the house. This is strictly the way you test it. You can literally run your truck or your car off a remote fuel source if you don't want to pump old nasty gas that's left in the fuel tank into your carburetor and filter plugging it all up. And what we're going to do here is we're going to screw this little jewel in and get it to go. It's not that hard. What we're going to do is we're just going to snug it down just a little bit. Don't have to be tight. These things are compression seated. And what we're going to do is we're going to turn this bottle of water upside down. And we're going to put a little fuel pressure on it. And we're going to see if we get fuel in the bowl. Looky there, there goes the float. Is it going to stop? That's the other reason you do this test. So that you know that your fuel float is below and not hitting the housing above it. So now I know that my carburetor is going to fill full of fuel, which it wasn't doing before. And as you can see, it's going to be kind of hard to see, but there's water in the fuel. The accelerator pump right there's got water in it. There's water in the bowl. So it's got a full fuel bowl, so it should run now. And that's our repair. Take out the needle housing. Take out this gasket, gives you more clearance. Even though I could have put the gasket back in there, it doesn't make any difference. It just leaks. It leaks back into the fuel bowl. There's your needle and seat right there. Make sure you got your spring. It's going to be very difficult to see that spring. It's a spring holder. But it's right there. You need that spring holder in place, because when your fuel level drops, that's what pulls the needle up and keeps the needle in place. It's hard to see that little dude, but it's a little tiny spring. I have the old needle over here. It's a lawnmower needle. You see that little spring assembly? There's some white. Okay, that spring goes over your float. It attaches to your needle. Make sure that spring's in place. Now I broke the tip off of this because it was already cracked. That's the needle that was in it. It was not allowing any fuel to come in. So now that we've tested our assembly for fuel, and we got fuel in the assembly, and it's got the float levels fairly close, you can monitor that. We're going to go to the next step, and that will be to drain the fuel out, or the water out, without losing the spring off the float. Now we've drained the water out of it. You can see the float's back down. And we are going to go ahead and try to assemble this as fast as we can. There's lots of things involved here. You need to put this in. You make sure that your accelerator pump spring's here, and that your primary needle spring. And this one's kind of a sucky one. Don't lose these parts. Primary needle spring, make sure it's in there. Try to center it up, if it will center, because this part right here is really tricky. At least for some people it is, some people it ain't. What we're going to do is we're going to drop these needles in these little starter holes right here. It is kind of tricky, believe me. You want to make sure that you have your choke it'll drop down. It'll drop in there fairly easy, but it'll stick right here, so you got to kind of try to get it to fall into the slot. And trust me, this is probably one of the hardest parts you'll have to deal with. Because you have to maintain that if it ain't going up and down, it's not in. It's not properly. And it's tricky. So you have to sit here and kind of hopefully get your needles to go down in that spring. Like I say, this is probably one of the trickiest parts right here. Which, due to the length of the video, that I not want it to be any longer. Because like I said, I've had the springs give me a lot of trouble here. Because they don't stay in the middle. But anyway, you need this thing. It's not going to cooperate, which means you get to pull it all back off. And I'm going to try get this spring to center, because it's actually hanging on the spring generally. And that spring's not going to center very good for me. Like I said, it's probably one of the hardest and most tricky things you got going right here, is that spring. It is very hard to get it to where it'll stay in the middle. And what you're going to do is you're going to end up hanging on it because it's offset. If you don't know what offset means, this little spring is hard to get in the middle so that you can drop this in there. But anyway, this thing's supposed to move freely up and down, and when you get it all the way in, it will be spring loaded. And if you don't get it all the way in, it'll be sticking up here too high, and you're going to mess it up if you put the top on it. So anyway, God bless in the 405. We're working on this carburetor, and yeah, I'm going to have to get that spring adjusted. God bless.